week 2 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few players I look to buy and trade for this week. The first player, Marvin Harrison Jr. of the Arizona Cardinals. So a highly touted prospect coming out from college to the NFL. He was a top 5 pick in the NFL draft this season. And in fantasy drafts, he was going second, third round was Marvin Harrison. But his debut and was going on, only 1 catch, 4 yards. So after coming off a poor performance and people picking him, like I said, second, third round range, I would go out there and try to make an offer for Marvin Harrison. It's only 1 game. At the end of the ball game, he was open in the end zone, but Kyler Murray didn't see him, or he would have had a nice ball game finished up with is Marvin Harrison. And him and Murray just have to get on the same page and get rapport going as the season goes on. So after coming off a performance, fantasy owners who own Harrison Jr., I believe, are definitely frustrated. For him to only get 1 catch for 4 yards on only 3 targets is unacceptable. So right now, after coming off a game where he was non-existent and really didn't even get targeted, this is a perfect time to buy him low, because if he goes out there next week versus the Los Angeles Rams and has a big ball game, then obviously his value is back up there as Marvin Harrison. So after a bad week 1, he's a buy low player this week. The next player is his teammate Trey McBride of the Arizona Cardinals. So Trey McBride was a top 3-4 tight end drafted in fantasy drafts, and he only had 5 catches, 30 yards in week 1 on 9 targets. I think McBride would be harder to pry away in a deal than Marvin Harrison, with tight end being a weaker position, obviously. And he still had 9 targets in the ball game, no doubt about it. But this offense, they just couldn't do much versus Buffalo, even though they got off to a hot start and blew the lead in that week 1 ball game. So Trey McBride, we know, is a great athlete. We know he's one of the best tight ends to come out of college football in the last few seasons. And like I said, he only averaged 6 yards per catch in that ball game in week 1. And this Cardinal offense in the passing game didn't look great. James Conner looked great. Kyler Murray, he didn't really do much besides run in that week 1 performance. So if you could get Harrison and Trey McBride, I think those are good buy low candidates this week. The next player is another tight end, Mark Andrews of the Baltimore Ravens. Andrews, after coming off injury, he still might not be 100% after the injury to his lower leg last season. And Isaiah Likely, he took over in the second half of that game, 9 catches, 111 yards, and a touchdown, where Mark Andrews only had 2 targets and Likely had 11 targets in that week 1 loss at the Kansas City Chiefs. So Mark Andrews, I still think, could go out there and make plays. He's got to get his legs on the rim, got to get his win back as well, I believe, for this Raven team. And definitely Isaiah Likely emerging late last season when Andrews was out. And now in week 1 could be a problem for Andrews' usage. But after that performance, maybe the Andrews owner, he's thinking that Isaiah Likely is going to take over at the tight end position and be the number 1 with Andrews not doing much and being more of a blocker. But I believe that's not going to be the case. I think Andrews in week 2 could bounce back. He's got a good matchup versus the Vegas Raiders that can't stop anyone. We saw in week 1 versus the Chargers. And right now, well, his value is possibly going to be the lowest it's going to be all season. I would go out there and try to make an offer and a deal for Andrews this week. Next play is Jaylen Warren of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Najee Harris out-touched Warren a decent amount in the week 1 loss at the Atlanta Falcons. And he's not 100% as Jaylen Warren as well, coming off a hamstring injury. So I think they eased him in this game. Warren, obviously the better pass catcher out of the backfield for this Pittsburgh Steelers team. And the other thing with Justin Fields, a quarterback in week 1, the opportunities went down a little bit where Fields took the football running 14 times. But Jaylen Warren, I think, is the more talented back. I know in between the tackles, he's not going to be as physical as Najee Harris or back than Najee Harris is Jaylen Warren. But last season, what a year was for Warren in terms of catching the football, where he had 61 catches, which was amongst the league leaders at the running back position. So like I said, Warren not 100% with the hamstring. And with Justin Fields running the football, some touches were going to go away. But I believe Russell Wilson most likely will get an opportunity once again in the starting lineup, where he will obviously get Warren the ball more in situations where Justin Fields would run more than a Russell Wilson. So right now, with Jaylen Warren was non-existent in week 1, and he's a talented back, and like I said, one of the better backs in PPR in terms of catching the football. He's definitely a player to buy low this week. The next player, Drake London of the Atlanta Falcons. So London, he was going very early in fantasy drafts. I know it was only 1 week. I know him and Kirk Cousins have to work the kinks out, and once Kirk Cousins is rolling, Drake London's going to get things going. For week 1 of down performance, 2 catches, 15 yards on 3 targets. And believe it or not, Ray McLeod was the leading receiver in week 1 for this Falcon team. So it was a tough matchup, no doubt about it. Steelers defense, I still think, is a good unit. Week 2, a little better of a matchup for Philadelphia, where we saw them give up a lot of yards and points to the Green Bay Packers in Brazil in week 1. So I think London's going to bounce back. And I know London last season, a lot of bad performances, but with Kirk Cousins a quarterback, and he's still got to get his legs under him as well, is Cousins coming off the Achilles injury. I believe London, it's just one bad game, and he's going to get things going. So if you could get him on a discount, this would be the perfect time to do it after he's coming off a 2-catch, 15-yard ball game. Here, I look to buy and trade for is another receiver, Malik Nabers of the New York Giants. I was big on Malik Nabers coming into the season, but many Nabers owners, they're probably thinking Daniel Jones, he can't move the football at all, and Nabers isn't going to do much this season. So week 1, he ended with 5 catches, 66 yards on 7 targets. But I believe if he continues to struggle over the next few weeks, we could see Daniel Jones pulled, and they could go to Tommy DeVito at the quarterback position, or Drew Lock is this New York Giant team, where Daniel Jones, he's looking to run a lot. In week 1, he ran the football because he just can't pass the football effectively. So right now, Malik Nabers, I think he's under the radar a little bit. He dropped in some fantasy drafts, and if he went to a good situation with a better quarterback, he would have been a 2nd or 3rd round, I believe, in fantasy drafts. So right now, after a middle-of-the-pack performance, and it's more got to do with Daniel Jones than anything, I think Nabers, you could get on a bit of a discount this week. Final player I look to buy and trade for this week is Chris Olave of the New Orleans Saints. So Chris Olave, he didn't have any part in that 47-10 victory for the New Orleans Saints in week 1 versus the Carolina Panthers. And this week, a tough matchup, no doubt about it, at the Dallas Cowboys, where they're one of the better defenses in the league. And Olave, only 2 catches, 11 yards, and 2 targets. So that's definitely frustrating if you're the Olave owner. You see the Saints put up 47 points, and he only comes out with 2 catches, 11 yards, with 3.10 fantasy points. But I think Olave, even in tougher matchups, is going to bounce back. Derek Carr and the same team, they're going to have trust in Olave in this ball game at the Dallas Cowboys. Because like I said, this Cowboy defense, one of the better units in the league. And right now, Olave owners, they took him 2nd, 3rd round in most fantasy leagues, and they didn't expect a big dud of a performance versus one of the worst defenses in the league. So after coming off that game, he's a buy low candidate this week. So that's a few players I look to buy and trade for week 2 of the fantasy football season.